How do you feel when you look back at your art from many years ago? Do you feel embarrassed by your past inexperience? Or do you swell with pride at how far you've come? Personally, I fall into the second category. Looking back at past work from time to time can give me a confidence boost and even the motivation that I need to keep practicing. Zooming out in time this way gives me an opportunity to see the forest through the trees. It allows me to see that I really am making progress, even if I don't realize it day to day. It also reminds me that I am ultimately competing with nobody but myself. It can be so easy to play a comparison game with all of the talented artists that I follow on social media, but far too often that exercise can be more self-deprecating than motivational. Comparing myself with myself is so grounding. I may not have the authority to determine that my art is better than so-and-so's art, but I do have the sovereignty to define progress for myself. What more can you ask for? I know I'm not the only artist to have this experience, but I believe it's an experience that more artists should cultivate for themselves. Another benefit of looking back at past work is that it provides us a window into our past minds. What were we interested in? How were we feeling? What were we thinking about? What sorts of images were we projecting onto the world? It's a similar visceral feeling that we can have when looking back at social media posts and photographs of ourselves from many years ago. A mixture of embarrassment, humor, and nostalgia. You may think, I'm not that person anymore, and yet I remember being that person. Perhaps this gives us an opportunity to reflect on the events in our lives which have changed us, formed us into who we are in the present. On New Year's Eve of 2018, I decided to synthesize all of these experiences, quantifying artistic progress, capturing psychological snapshots, and recording change in self-image over time. To do this, I vowed to paint a self-portrait once a year, which represented who I had become over the course of the last 12 months. This time-lapse is the painting process of my fourth self-portrait. I don't have a huge collection yet, but by complete chance, this exercise has recorded some of the most tumultuous years of my life. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of each self-portrait I've painted so far, and why I made the design choices that I did. Hopefully this will give you a little bit of inspiration in case you decide to follow my advice and start this exercise for yourself. I really do encourage you to at least try it. I found it to be incredibly insightful. The passage of time is so difficult to measure. I often feel as though I haven't changed at all, but then I look at my collection of self-portraits and I feel viscerally how far I've come. Imagine how powerful this collection will be when I'm 30 and I've documented a whole decade of my life, or when I'm 80 and I've documented a whole lifetime. I'm sure as you get older, it becomes more and more difficult to remember who you were artistically and personally 10 years ago. But if I continue with this exercise, I won't have to guess. I'll be able to see it with my own eyes. Moreover, this has already been meaningful to others as well. My mom wants me to make prints of all of my portraits for her. She says they capture me in a way that photographs never could. In fact, I'm actually really camera shy. I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but I just hate the way I look in photographs. Like, I'll look in the mirror and feel like I look pretty good, but as soon as the camera is on me, I flatten so much. It's like all the life is drained out of my eyes and all I can see is my insecurities. You may feel like because you have self-esteem issues, this exercise wouldn't be for you. but I really empathize. I actually avoid filming or photographing myself most of the time, and that is why my face isn't super central to my online brand. So I get that it may seem like it would be uncomfortable to stare at your face for so long, but I've actually found it to be incredibly therapeutic. First of all, I do use photographs of my face as reference. You could use a mirror if you would rather. I'm not great at posing for photographs, so I think that's partially why I find them to be so unflattering. But with art, I don't have to follow my reference exactly. I have the ability to emphasize and highlight the parts of my look that I enjoy, and sort of let those aspects of myself I'm not crazy about fade into the background. I do aim to capture the essence of what I look like, but it doesn't need to be brutally realistic if that isn't your style. To be clear, I'm not making myself look like a photoshopped Instagram baddie. I think it's super important that my portraits really look like me, but I am being compassionate in my interpretation of my own face. Ultimately, art is subjective, so you do have a little more wiggle room than you would with a photograph, for example. Secondly, I think a lot of people with self-esteem issues also struggle with dysmorphia. I definitely do. I sometimes feel super uncomfortable and shocked by my face. I don't always identify with it, and sometimes I internally will feel like I look super different, and then I see myself in a reflection or photo, and I'm kind of shocked and disappointed. This exercise has forced me to methodically study my face and thus retrain my dysmorphia somewhat. This means that even if it's a little weird at first, I'm ultimately becoming more comfortable with what I look like, and that is a really positive thing. I will say that, of course, if this wouldn't be safe for you, I totally understand. Everyone is really different, and you know yourself better than anyone. All I can say is that it has been really beneficial for me, and that I think you ought to consider it if you haven't already. We have a lot of discussion on body positivity and body neutrality now, which I think is a wonderful movement. I think that face positivity or neutrality is under that umbrella, but I do wish that more people spoke about it specifically. I feel pretty okay with my body most of the time, but personally, my biggest insecurity is on my face. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's not helpful, but I know I can't be the only person who feels this way. So that's part of why my portraits are headshots, because I'm actively trying to work through that kind of thing with this exercise. However, if it resonates with you to make full body images of yourself, then you could totally do that too. Now, some of you may be thinking that making self-portraits, especially so many of them, is a bit narcissistic. The idea of making art about yourself may cause you to feel uncomfortable. Besides the reasons I gave about feeling physically self-conscious, there's also a deeper component. Perhaps self-portraiture causes you to feel discomfort because you don't see yourself as a worthy artistic subject. And if so, I encourage you to question that. Ultimately, no matter who you are, no matter your current artistic ability, no matter what you look like or how comfortable you are with what you look like, you deserve to feel like you're beautiful. Beauty has many meanings. When in reference to people, we most commonly associate beauty with societal beauty, meaning how close a given person is to the standard of physical perfection of our time and culture. I love that art gives us an opportunity to see past that definition of beauty. So many artists push the boundaries of what we consider to be art and what we consider to be beautiful. To put something on a canvas gives it a certain dignity. It forces us to see it with reverence. sometimes that can cause an uncomfortable juxtaposition if it challenges what we usually think is respectable. So if you feel discomfort at the idea of placing yourself in that position of reverence, maybe it's because you don't feel like you deserve it. And that is all the more reason to challenge it. Paint yourself. Maybe the act of overriding your learned shamefulness and seeing yourself in that reverent light will be just the breakthrough you needed. Plus, these portraits are not just your face. I always work in symbolic elements which represent what the last year meant to me and the major events that took place within it. How I choose to do this will become more obvious when I explain all of my portraits, but I thought I should clarify this point because you're more than just your face. What you can try to capture in these pieces can be so much deeper than that. And in itself, that serves to remind you that your physical form is ultimately the least interesting part about you. It serves as a mere backdrop to your story, and that is really the crux of what you'll be able to capture with this exercise. Your story. So, without further ado, here is the abbreviated story of the last 4 years of my life. I hope you find it valuable in pursuing this exercise for yourself. At the end of 2018, I was in the middle of my 3rd year of college. The dandelion motif was a representation of my feeling that I was a resilient yet unwanted wildflower in a cultivated yet fragile garden. I had always appreciated dandelions in their ability to bloom brightly in the most unexpected of places, a yellow middle finger to all those who only appreciate the nature that they are able to dominate and control. In 2019, I was finding my way through the darkness of grief. Though I walked through what I identify as the dark night of the soul, it was simultaneously an unbelievable spiritual awakening. Though I suffered a lot, I also felt as though I was finally finding myself. In the midst of all of this, I had a powerful psychedelic experience in which I met the Mother of Darkness, Kali. She taught me that the void is a place of immeasurable beauty, and that without it, there would be no light. In 2020, well, we all know what happened in 2020. On a personal level, I was drawn out from within my suffering to meet with compassion the suffering of others. I also learned that compassion and anger, like darkness and light, are necessary counterparts to one another. I was immensely frustrated by the injustice I saw everywhere, but this time I knew that I was not standing alone. In 2021, I feel as though I have finally come to a place of hope and acceptance. I do not close my eyes to the ugliness of this world, and yet I choose to also see the beauty. Dark and light, suffering and happiness, life and death. These are all parts of this world, and they are all beautiful in their own ways. For me, nature is perfection. The colorful leaves of fall are warm and beautiful, yet underneath the surface, they are the warning of impending cold death. I finally graduated this year, and I grieved the death of this part of my life, this part of my identity. The autumn leaves fall to the earth, decompose, and are buried under the cold wintry silence. Yet, when spring arrives again, we see that their sacrifice nourished the budding wildflowers emerging from the cool, damp earth. Our lives too obey the endless cycles of death and rebirth. Also, my art has gotten way better. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'm really very new at this, and so every little bit of support means a lot to me. And please leave me a comment letting me know what you think, also letting me know how I could improve. So, will you be painting a self-portrait this year? If you do, I'd love to see it. You could tag me in them on Instagram at thewildadversary. And thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.